Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be talking about audio again. And we've got a pretty good panel here. Mickey has come to join us for our audio day. So it's good to have him. Carl's here. So lots of other audio experts. Those are just the ones that show up just on Tuesdays. So it's a great day to ask questions about audio and in general. And so definitely throw those questions in. Also, a reminder that today at 9, right after and after hours, David Paskin will be starting a series on eCam. David, do you want to give us a little overview of what you're planning?
Sure. We're going to jump into how we can best use eCam for virtual production, for streaming. We're going to take a deep dive into all the different ways that you can really maximize the capacity that eCam brings to the table.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. That's at 9 o'clock, and we'll be doing that for a couple of weeks at least, maybe ongoingly. So we'll see as far as long as David's willing to do it. So we're really happy to have David do that. So thanks a lot, David. All right. Let's go ahead and jump into the first question. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Our first question in from Richard Lavery in Belfast, Northern Ireland. A local parade would like us to stream their event, but they're worried about Facebook striking the commercial music of some floats. Is there a way to pre-clear music on Facebook that you have the rights to?
Go ahead, Bill.
We all wish this was much easier than it is, but that's because there's not just one kind of rights. You can't go to one place and clear this. You have a series of rights, and this is just part of the way the Copyright Act works in America. You have what are called performance rights. You have synchronization rights. I think there's probably a couple of others that might, publishing credits. It gets complicated in there.
It's actually not as complicated.
Oh, okay.
It's just impossible. So it's not. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just highly improbable. Bill's absolutely correct. There's a lot of different rights that you might have to clear, but you don't have to do that with Facebook. It doesn't even matter if you do. You have to get Facebook. The content owner has to clear your page or your event. Similar in a similar way to YouTube. And the problem is that getting through that is actually harder than what Bill just started to describe, is to actually get somebody to do that and actually know how to do it and whether they're going to do it for parade is, it's hard to get them to do it for VIPs, so it is, Bill's absolutely right. In the general state of what it takes, you have to do that. But in this specific area, you have to get into the machinations of the Facebook, copyright policy system, and that I don't think is going to happen for you anytime soon. We have gotten it done a couple times, and I've done a lot of Facebook streams. So it's when you find the right person, it's just someone. All they have to do is flip a little radio box, like this is your page. It's very simple for the person to do. But to give you a sense of it on YouTube side, they might spend a year working on that for like Coachella, to try to get that working, and that's inside the company.
Hey, if I could make one more little comment, there are groups that will help you do this. Should you have giant budgets in the future and want to do this, there are places. We used to use a company called BZ Rights and Permissions out of New York City, and if you give them enough time, they can clear things like that. But as Alex says, it's not easy.
But in Facebook?
I think their rights clearance organizations will take on a project if you have enough money clear for a specific target. Right. But it's if you have enough resources.
Yeah, these are big. Usually it's a part of a very large project that you kind of go through that process. I think that you will have to, now what I will say is that both Facebook and YouTube have gotten a lot easier going where they don't kill your stream and they don't usually give you a strike. They just give you a copyright flag. And I don't have as much experience with it with Facebook recently, but with YouTube, it's definitely gotten to be a lot. I mean, you just get flags, it's very rare unless they're playing the Eagles, then you might get a strike. So, but outside of that, it's usually a pretty straightforward thing. Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California. Does the panel have recommendations for House of Worship hearing assist systems?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, our House of Worship uses the Listen Technologies. It's a little bit older model that we have. The newer one looks like this. The older model that we have is about $800. And the nice thing about these is that they are RF and $800 for the transmitter. And then, of course, you need receivers for each individual. And then you can see that these are just single earpieces. They're nothing fancy. They're not like the Shure PS1000 that'll get you, Dante in stereo, and what IEM would be for performances for music. These are just simple to use and very basic. We use them not just for hearing assist, but also for language interpretation.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, absolutely. The big name with assistive listening is Listen Technologies. If you are in a place that maybe are not close to RF police, depending on your jurisdiction, you may build up a system made of an FM transmitter with an amplifier at maybe quarter watt or maybe 10 watts, depending on your jurisdiction. And you can get very, very affordable FM radios and with cheap earbuds. That's a way to get around things. Again, depending on where you live, you have to check your local laws on that. A few things to keep in mind with assistive listening systems. You need to build you need to make sure your mix is a mono compatible mix, because many of these are only in mono. And also you most likely want to send out a mix that's a little bit more controlled in terms of dynamics. So you may want to build another mix maybe on a matrix that has a bit more compression in there. You don't want to push your full dynamic range that you push out to your big PAs into people's ears. That could be painful sometimes.
How many different is it just one channel that it's putting out? You were talking about doing translation. Is it do you only have the 75 and 216, or are you able to have? Are there subcarriers in there so that you can have multiple languages?
There are channels in there within that either 75 megahertz spectrum or 216 megahertz spectrum.
Great. Yeah. Because it's because with the FM problem, if you end up needing a lot of channels, then trying to get all the different FM transmissions to work becomes a thought process. Mitchell?
Yeah, one thing to be careful of on the FM is that you need a type accepted FM transmitter that's part 15. A lot of people ignore that. It's some marketing materials may say that they're accepted, but they're not. You have to be very careful. Otherwise, you might be breaking the law, even though it's a worthwhile cause.
Yeah. Next question.
Next question is for me. I'm asking, my friend has a Zoom Pro account. He wants to host a funeral for his mother. What would be the best way to host about 20 people on Zoom? He'll be running audio and video packages.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would go ahead and pony up the $79 and get webinar, and then with a request in, they'll give you $720, no problem. We had the folks on, and they said that they would from Zoom, and they would definitely give us anybody who requested $720. So the reason being why I'm saying webinar is people tend to put their phones in their pockets while they're at these things, and all of a sudden you just get unmuted and it interrupts the services. So I highly recommend doing webinar. People don't really need to see each other, I believe, and I've done a couple of these now. It's just so much cleaner to do webinar. Lock everybody out, let them chat if they want to chat. So open up that and let them banter, and that's the way I would do it.
It feels like this is where breakout rooms in webinar would make a lot of sense, because during the service, you kind of want it to be a single only experience, and then possibly let people talk to each other afterwards. That would be the thing maybe that is something where you put a meeting up after that to let people jump into if they want to talk. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if you're going to be playing out video packages as a camera feed, like a webcam, for example, like your ATEM, into your computer, you would want to bump up from the default resolution of 360p. You can do that, as a guy mentioned, by requesting, or if you don't get the request in time, you can also bring in a Zoom room or a little Zoom appliance, like say a Facebook portal, to give you that 720p bump up. If you want 1080, that's a bit more of a process, and Zoom is not as giving with that. But if in case there's a lot of people in this community that have access to 1080p accounts, that maybe you could ask for some help for that single event.
Yeah, and from a production perspective, you can decide you need some kind of software that's going to play it out. I wouldn't get into a bunch of hardware in this case to make that work. I know that my sister did my grandmother's over YouTube with OBS, and that worked fine for just a handful of stills and so on and so forth. The ones that I've done where I've actually been paid to do them for other people for memorials I've used Memo Live for that, because they're small. We don't have the budget to turn our whole system on, but it was one of those things that I was able to stack up, the different things that they're going to want to play, the different things that they have there. One thing to think about is that people are coming in before the event. What are you going to do at that point? And so we had, we built, there were some videos and some stills and some other things that we were able to play, with some music, and able to kind of fill that all in. Ecamm is, you might want to stay for the Ecamm thing at 9, because Ecamm might be a perfect solution for exactly what you're trying to do as well. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, for leading up to the event, I would just use Stage Timer and put the countdown. Like, let's say it started at 11, 30 minutes before I would open up the room, and actually have a live camera feed of just the guests that are in person gathering, but then have the stage timer at like 50 or maybe 20% opacity, depending on the look. And then that gives some people to look at something knowing that the event's coming, and then I'll pump in some music. The other thing is if you need a 1080p account for something like this, or anybody in the group that needs a 1080p temporarily for a webinar, hit me up. I have 40 extra accounts, so just let me know.
Yeah, they're just laying around, Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it easy for somebody that's never done a Zoom meeting to get that webinar account? They just go make a normal request as they do through sales at Zoom, and then you can pre-configure that account for that particular application.
Yeah. But I would definitely practice.
Oh yeah,
if you haven't done it before. So, I mean, if for anyone for your friend who's doing it, that I think that one of the big things that we see with most of these things is that someone buys something, they turn it on, they may get in once, but you really want to go through the process of how am I going to start it up, and what is it going to look like, and how is it, even for me, I've done a lot of these, and I will practice with a launch cycle and that little bit, and in the playouts, probably 3 or 4 times at least, almost all the way through. Even if I've done it 1,000 times, like just to make sure that I understand where everything's going to go. And if everything doesn't work perfectly, like if I don't hit a button and it doesn't do exactly what I want, some little glitch, I'll go back and start again, and so I'll just, and just keep on working through those types of things. All right, next question.
Next question coming in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What is it possible for Alex and panelists to share again how Apple TV can be used in video production?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, it can be until the way you use it just stops working right before you want to show it off to everyone. So I have my Apple TV plugged into one of my inputs on my ATEM Mini, and then I use the Shoot app on my phone, which I then AirPlay over to my Apple TV. And the only reason I do that is because Alex told me to.
It works really well. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, to add on to that, I'm going to demonstrate something here. Here's my Apple TV. I'm going to AirPlay my iPad. I can go on to then YouTube, or look at just anything else. If you want to display photos, movies, you name it. If it's on your iPad or your phone, you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the ways that we get a lot of studios. For a lot of studios we've built in the past, we just take we get an Apple TV and we put it underneath we don't even put it in the mistake people make when they build these little studios is they put the Apple TV in their control room. We put it right under the desk, like literally right where people are going to sit, so that the amount of distance that it has to go to AirPlay is almost zero. And then we have it. We use it all the time. If someone just wants to show something from a Mac or a phone or a iPad, it's just super seamless to make that work. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so AirPlay is the king here. So how you use AirPlay, as we said, like you use, Filmic Pro can also do it too if you get rid of all the on-screen stuff. Another thing about wanting to get stuff onto the screen and you want to do a 16:9, you're going to have to get yourself an iPhone 8 or an iPhone 7, because they are the last two phones that did 16:9. AirPlay will preserve the screen, so it'll give you pillar bars. So that's one thing you have to remember with AirPlay. If you're sharing your screen with AirPlay, it doesn't share in 16:9. It shares pixel for pixel. It remaps the pixels essentially, and will give you pillar bars or black bars. So iPhone 8 or an iPhone 7 is your best friend if you want to do like a website or something. You want to show something on the screen that's mirrored essentially via AirPlay. Then yeah, that's your best friend because they don't make any device. Apple doesn't make any devices now that are 16:9 as far as iOS or.
And I was just trying to figure out what to do with my iPhone 8. I literally was. I was sitting there like, should I keep this? And now Carl has persuaded me maybe I should test that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the other thing is that just about everybody has an old Apple TV, even a 1080 will do the trick. And in my case, I use the Sienna app to launch the app that's built into your phone if you want to, or you can download the Sienna app that'll run on your Mac or your iPhone. Excuse me.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, not everybody lives in the Apple universe, so people with Android phones can use Miracast, or they can use Chromecast, or they can use many of the other wireless protocols to connect to their TV set. So you may not be able to connect to that Apple TV if you have an Android phone.
Next question.
Next question is coming from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. I've got a client who will be using a Rode Go2 for himself and wants a conference room style mic for the table to grab the audio from participants, both going into Zoom. Looking for a mic for the table. Could there be one with a speaker built in?
Mickey?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Sanken Cub. It's a low boundary mic, a cardioid one, so it gives you a bit better reach. It wouldn't work nearly as well if the rest of the people in the room are surrounding it, and possibly behind it. But if they are towards one single direction, I like the Sanken Cub microphone. I think it's about $400, $500 US. Take a look at companies like Crown and AKG as well for low boundary microphones. They have ones in Omni.
Now go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so and the next step up from boundary microphone would be like what a super boundary microphone is, which is like Clear One. So it has like 24 microphones in a panel, and so those microphones are going to start around $4,000, and then the amplifiers, mixers for them are like $11,000. So be aware these are like permanent installations that used to go on the ceiling of a conference room, or maybe on the table in a conference room, but they're pretty high end as far as they're essentially beamforming technology. So that's kind of where you take a boundary microphone and put it into like a 3D space. It does work. They work quite well. You got to be careful about reflections in the room though, because that can confuse the beamforming. So having a more dead conference room is better than having a live conference room essentially. They do work quite well, if you can tell by the beamforming in the new MacBooks as well. So they're using very similar kind of technology on a smaller scale, using I think 3 microphones rather than 24 microphones. But it gets expensive if you want to do it well.
And I got to say how much of a difference the walls make. People spend a lot of money on the mics, but I was in a company where they had a very, very, like it was whiteboards and glass all the way around. And this is a company that knows a lot about this kind of thing. And it just was very hard to listen to anybody talk in there. And literally there was an office next to it that was really soft. And it felt like you could do almost anything in there and it would sound good. I mean, it really is just an amazing amount of difference working on the walls. And I think people just, as they build these now and when they think about, oh, what is it going to take to make this work? Well, what it might take is also making the walls better. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to add as well, since you mentioned a mic on the table, you can also go with a single, like large diaphragm condenser microphone that can be set to omnidirectional. That could help you, though you have to bear in mind, like since it's a single mic picking up, a large area, you need to manage expectations. You would either have to dumb down the single Rode on the host or on the client, or make it very clear that the person wearing the lavalier is way higher in the mix than everyone else.
Go ahead, Courtney.
You see a lot of these things in conference rooms. There are speaker phones that have a speaker. I was asking about that as well with multiple microphones. You can get them, and they have a DSP in there that does digital signal processing and controls which microphone of that array is picked up. They're not great, but for a budget solution cheaper than Carl's, $30,000 possibility, that might be a choice.
I'll go ahead, David.
That's what I was thinking of originally. The challenge is that my understanding, I don't think, I could be wrong, those are not XLR or quarter inch. And since I need to merge this with the Rode Go 2, I need to be able to plug them both into an audio interface and then be able to mix them, unless I do it in software.
Yeah.
I think the one I showed was a USB interface. So I think it shows up just as a USB source into the computer. So.
Yeah, you're trying to put it into a mixer, right, David? That's the challenge.
I guess so, yeah, because he wants to also use a lav mic for himself. So I need to mix the two sources together.
And there's a couple different ways of doing that. I mean, you could use some kind of software mixer as well. You could use something like Loopback. That's what I'm using later for the little mic thing here is Loopback could mix both of those together in the computer. So, I mean, make them both available at least. There used to be a company called Octopus that we used for those kinds of things. We'd have to put up to 8 XLRs, and then it would be like a USB input to something, and it would just show up as a web, and it would do a lot of auto mixing. They were bought by Shure, and I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I haven't seen anything come out the other end, but Shure bought them a while ago. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. Is there a web browser app for the Apple TV 4K? Didn't see it in the App Store.
Go ahead, Carl.
No, but not really. So there are some kludgy ways of doing it, but you have to use another device. So as I said before, you can use like an iPhone or an iPad and just AirPlay that web browser to the big screen. And essentially it's a mirrored device. But also in Mac OS, there is the ability now to actually have the Apple TV as a monitor. So you can go into your monitor settings and say, I want the Apple TV to be my external monitor. And it doesn't have to be mirrored either. It can actually be its own monitor. So you can actually drag a web browser over to your big TV and have the Apple TV. Essentially, Apple TV is your monitor driver. Kind of the way of thinking of it. But you'd need a iOS device, an iPad device, or a Mac device to actually have the browser running. But you can display it on Apple TV live with very little latency.
Good, Tom.
Yes, as Carl said, there is no browser on the Apple TV. It'd be really difficult to use. You'd have to, move around and try to key in that URL. But if you've got an iPad, put it in there. You can go out to your favorite site, say officehours.global.
Next question.
Next question in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Is it possible to use FarPlay I/O to reduce audio latency enough to spotlight an ATEM SuperSource program in the same Zoom meeting as participants without needing a breakout room or second meeting?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. I think what you're trying to say is you want your contributors to speak directly into the meeting while have the audience view your produced video through webcam output that you are sending. If that is the case, the latency you're dealing with is video being too slow. So using FarPlay and having audio actually go faster would be counterintuitive. You want to, this won't really work if you're going to have them in the same meeting as the audience. You really want to have them either in a breakout room or in a totally separate meeting and deliver both audio and video through one box.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. For some time, Zoom rejected my iPad Pro to connect to Zoom running on a new MacBook Pro 16-inch as a shared screen. It does not work with wired or wireless connections between the Mac and iPad. A window pops up and says no connection is possible.
I'm just trying to figure out. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I had a little bit of this too. I used to use my iPad Pro as a source through the ATEM Mini that I would be able to punch to. Starting about, I guess, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, it stopped working. And I actually brought in my secondary laptop and used the same HDMI path, and that works fine. So right now, if I click to my other desktop, that's being fed from my old laptop. That works fine. But adapting my iPad through HDMI just was iffy for a while, then stopped working. I wonder if it's a signal strength issue or something like that. I'm trying to figure out other ways to get that done, but it's been frustrating for me. So I think there might have been some code change in how they read the HDMI port or something like that. I just know I've had the same experience you have, Stefan, and I don't think that's uncommon.
I just wonder if it's some kind of security issue, like having two devices that could connect to it. Connected, when it says, "Oh, you can't do this," oftentimes that's a security issue.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. It's felt like something changed in the core code that suddenly disallowed that. And happening.
The question is whether it's Zoom or Apple. Usually when you're dealing with Apple products, Apple can decide that shouldn't do that, and then we're stuck. Next question.
Robert Choji from Los Angeles. What USB audio interface do you recommend for use with Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro?
Go ahead, Carl.
It depends, like how many channels you want to get simultaneous in. But I would always suggest if you don't have an audio interface, or you don't have like a higher quality interface that does high resolution that you may want to do for sampling and stuff, then I'm always going to go with the Behringer, the 404 HD. So there's 3 Behringers that are in the higher end quality. There are some really cheap Behringers, avoid those. So if they end with HD, they're the ones I'll suggest. This is a 4-channel one. It has inserts as well. So that's like a mixer you'd see inserts. So you can put in a compressor and EQ if you want to put it before. That's the analog. That's still on the analog realm. It has direct monitor out, so essentially you can hear it out without delay, and it comes back, of course, so you can feed back 4 channels back from the computer. Then you're going up into the world of how far do you want to go. You can go up to the Apogees, the Symphony IOs, 32 channels in. So the world is your oyster when it comes to audio interfaces. How far you want to go, but I would start with the Behringer HD. I wouldn't go much lower than that, to be honest.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. As Carl mentioned, it depends how many ins and outs you need, and also what do you want to interface to? Do you need to interface with analog sources, mic level, line level sources, or do you need to interface with optical sources, to MADI sources? So that defines exactly which model. But in terms of specific brands, I would look at RME. I love RME products. Their clocks are amazing, very, very stable, very accurate. I would also look at Universal Audio, and also SSL has a couple relatively affordable interfaces as well.
Good, Mitchell.
Just a quick in and out. The Sound Devices makes a nice little USB that has XLR connectors on it that allow you to get in and out if you want to step up the ladder. RME has an 82, I think it's called an FM 82, that does all kinds of internal, external processing, transcoding, things like that. But what the guy said, all those extra channels, you may need them.
Yeah, if you put something like Dante virtual sound card on it, you can have a lot of different mixers and so on and so forth also act as those interfaces, like an X32, where you just have all that I/O and you just have Dante to make that work. My USB interface for this show is a Sound Devices Scorpio. I highly recommend it. Next question.
Next question from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. He's looking to use an FM transmitter for a drive-in movie event in a rural area. What equipment and permissions should I research? Tips on finding ideal transmission channels, audio processing for the stereo signal, etc.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of hardware, what I've played around with before is the Pluto SDR software-defined radio. You can find amplifiers that work for it, and also filters from companies like Mini Circuits. Big fan of them as well. Also, Alibaba and AliExpress are your friends.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, also on Amazon, you can find these little devices that are designed specifically for that, that operate under Section 15, I think, of Part 47 of the FCC ruling, which means you can use them. They're low power enough that you have to guarantee that they don't interfere with any existing broadcast. And if it's in a rural situation, you should be able to get away with it without a problem. You just have to search for an empty spot on the FM dial and set your frequency to that spot and not interfere with anybody else.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, a lot of those transmitters that you can find on Amazon are illegal or aren't going to perform very well. But I say, hey, it's a one-time event or a short event. You can bend the rules a little bit, I guess, and go with something a little more powerful, because in an outdoor theater, a Part 15 type transmitter may not reach from one end to the other. They only go for about 100 to 200 feet unless you start modifying it. So you might need like 1 or 2 watts in there to make that happen. And unfortunately for the FCC, you can buy those on Alibaba, as Mickey says, or pretty much anywhere on Amazon.
They might go up to 10 watts. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Well, yes, they do go up to 10 watts, and you might get a visit from a friendly fellow, too. Now, the practical chances of being cited by the FCC for illegal operation are somewhere between slim and none, but I would not and will not recommend that you violate federal law in order to accomplish an entertainment venue.
He's going to leave that up to me.
Put the transmitter in the middle of the crowd. That limits your radius of broadcast, and these things are less than a watt. 500 milliwatts is legal. Put it in the middle of the group so that the path to everybody is as small as can be. Do not put it at the screen where the people in the back aren't going to see it very well, and they're also not going to hear it. Look at the edges of the FM broadcast band. Every broadcast radio tunes from one channel below to one channel above at least. So the FM in America starts at 88.1, goes to 107.7. You can tune a radio to 107.9 or 87.9, which is out of the band and workable. And that's your quietest spots. Otherwise, you got to search in the middle for something that's not interfered with.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I also want to ask the question about antennas, because how do you place that antenna for the best reception? So we haven't heard much about the antenna. The box is one thing, but how do you get the antenna closer to the people that want to hear it?
You can't do that. You can't have line loss between a low-power transmitter and an antenna. You have to move the transmitter and its antenna, which is physically attached to the transmitter box, into the middle of the venue.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Kenneth. Although, Kenneth, a type-accepted transmitter has to be 100, not 500 milliwatts. What I would do is put it in a car or a van, and then that way, if the FCC shows up, you can make a quick getaway.
Go ahead. Put it on a drone. Like, don't take off with the drone. Just have it attached to it so the drone can just take off and just cut the cords and let it go. Go ahead, Courtney.
No, you just want to raise it up high. Just get it up above the cars. If you're in a parking lot situation where people are in their cars, get it up above the level of any metal that's around it. So put it on a stand that you can raise up about 10 or 15 feet, and that should give you a lot better coverage.
Yeah, and in general, I've used FM transmitters a lot. Grew up in the country and everything else, and in general, you can do an event. It's what gets you in trouble is doing the same event over and over and over again with something, and then you end up with some nosy neighbor that can't pick up Rush Limbaugh or something like that, and then they're upset about the fact that you're phasing into their show. So I think that's the real issue. So if you do it once and you're in the rural area, generally, you're not going to have any problem turning it up to whatever you turn it up to, as long as you do it for one open space. If you turn it up to 100 watts, someone's going to notice. But if you turn it up to 10 watts, chances are it's not going to go very far through the trees. And so the thing is that it generally, I'm not giving you legal advice, obviously, but we've done a lot of these, and we've done them up to 2 watts and in some cases more to make these things work, and we haven't ever had anybody do it, and because everyone knows that if they call the FCC, they're not going to get invited back again. So anyway, you're in the middle of nowhere, and folks in the country pay attention to that kind of thing. So anyway, so I think that you'd probably be okay with one of those transmitters. Just test it. But don't test it where you want to use it. Test it in some other. Just keep testing in different places. It's when you do it over and over again, and you get into somebody's show that they want to hear, that they get upset. So exactly what Kenneth also said is, if you get to the end of the dials when there's nothing that's there, then you should be okay to push it up a little bit and make it work.
Yeah, not all radios can tune those frequencies in, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Some can't.
But I'm saying somewhere near the end of the dial. Unless it's a really big country station, then don't do that. Next question.
Serge Blondin from Montreal, Canada. I just got my ATEM Extreme ISO and noticed more control over the mic in. Does the panel consider to be better than the one on the ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Mickey.
No. The ATEM Mini product line, same circuitry in terms of analog audio. I definitely would not use the built-in preamps. If you feed line level into it and set the ATEM Mini to expect line level, then you can get away with something serviceable. But generally speaking, it's not the best.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so internally it's the same chipset that's in the entire, all 5 of them, I believe. Maybe even in the Constellation as well, the HD Constellations may have the same audio chipset that runs the Fairlight, built-in Fairlight. Now, the 3.5 jack has got a bit of a people kind of misrepresent what it is. It's line level, unbalanced line level, so that's the same as a DSLR. So essentially the ATEM Mini, the very first one, the vanilla one, before we had all the rest, it was kind of meant to replicate the same inputs you had on a laptop or the same inputs you have on a DSLR, because that's how people would get their microphone in if they had a microphone, if they were a gamer and they were live streaming. So when you think about that, then the 2 types of microphones you would get into an ATEM Mini would be one that was via line level. So that would be the microphone maybe out of a camera, so audio out of a camera into the ATEM Mini if you're not going to go through HDMI. But the other one is plug-in power. So if people try to put an SM58 into an ATEM Mini and they go, it doesn't work that well, because it's not designed for that. It's designed for plug-in power, which is lavalier mics and headset mics, and they are balanced. So they are balanced in for plug-in power mics because they are TRS balanced, and that's how it works. It's just that the line level can't be balanced because it's left and right, whereas a plug-in power mic, of course, is mono. So just keep that in mind, that it's designed for lavaliers and headset mics that require plug-in power, and some instrument mics have that as well if you want to use that. For line level, as Mickey said, you can do it, but you've got to be careful how long your cable runs are for that. It is not designed for an SM58. So if you've got yourself an XLR to 3.5 cable, it's not designed for that. So when you try to put like a Heil PR40 or any type of dynamic microphone into it, or any condenser microphone into it, won't work. It's not designed for that. So people try and they say, oh, it's terrible. Of course it's terrible because it's not designed for it. It's a pity that Blackmagic don't say what it's not for. They have this thing about not saying don't use this. They just don't put it in the manuals. But they do put it in the settings using a plug-in power microphone or line level. The plug-in power microphone is what it's meant for. So if you put a lav mic in there, it'll be as good as a Rode Go, pretty much, because it's got the same type of amplifier.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Carl touched on it. I use the output into a Henry Matchbox, which is a DI basically. It takes the unbalanced input and creates XLR balanced outputs. And that cable that goes between the ATEM and any device should be very short.
Go ahead, Mitchell. Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the audio inputs on most on DSLRs is mic level, unbalanced mic level, not line level. And the same is true with the inputs on the ATEM Mini product line. They are mic level inputs, but if you enable line level on them, the ATEM Mini simply puts in a pad on that mic level path. It's not a totally separate path that's designed for line level. It's just the pad that's added on.
Yeah, and I would almost never use that as my preamp. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, California. What studio monitors does Mickey use for 2-channel work, and why?
Mickey?
The monitors that my ears have been used to for the longest have been the Genelec 1032s, and all my rooms here have 1032s. I love the wooden cabinet. They sound, in my opinion, so much better than the current generation of metal housing Genelecs. The same at home, I also have 1032s there, but in this room, I also have Genelec 8050s and also JBL 805s.
That's great.
Sorry, no, JBL 308s.
308s. Mm-hmm. Those are big. Those are larger than I expected when I ordered them. So it's like they're bigger than what I could put in to what I was doing. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. H2R Graphics 2.9 is out and drawing is back. Are we still planning a telestration lab?
I didn't know we were planning a telestration lab, but sure, we can do a telestration lab. Yeah, that sounds great. I'm not familiar with it yet. I haven't seen it's out, but so we'll have to jump into it. So if it has telestration, it sounds great. So let's we'll take a closer look at it. Maybe we can see if we can get somebody on to talk about it. Next question.
Chris is back with a question. I miss my Sony handheld PC, the GPD Win 3. There's a link to it. Seems like the modern replacement, anyone used one of these or have other options in roughly the same form factor with maybe Thunderbolt ports.
One thing I will say that it's really hard for me is links. Let's see here, links that come in after 7, because we just don't get to see these very much. It's cool. Is this new or is this old? I
think he's suggesting it's an old one there that you're looking at.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe with Thunderbolt ports.
No, it says Intel Gen 11 Tiger Lake PC, so that's fairly new.
Yeah. I don't know of anything that would be similar to it. Next question.
Gordon Lake, Los Angeles, California. When using a computer to work with an ATEM switcher, would a used laptop be a more cost-effective option than a mini PC with a separate monitor?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so if you're only using it to control the software, you don't need anything really too powerful, as long as it's probably less than 5 years old and has an Ethernet port. That'll pretty much do the job. Just don't run too many other things off it. Don't try to run your entire show on it. But if you're just using it as a software controller, you should be fine.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, if it's solely for controlling an ATEM, you might want to consider maybe getting an iPad that you can run Mix Effect on. Mix Effect is a powerful tool when combined with an ATEM.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, just be aware. I've done this many times with small Windows computers, stick PCs, but you got to be careful that it has the 64-bit version of Windows. The installer will not work for the ATEM switcher software. It will not install on 32-bit. It's 32-bit program, but it will not install on a 32-bit operating system. It requires 64-bit Windows.
And we're clipping right through these questions, so you might be able to get a couple more in before the top of the hour. Next question.
Next question from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Can we talk about if the new ATEM Pro is still a good purchase in July 2022? Teachers?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yes. So the thing that the ATEM Mini, we're talking about the ATEM Minis here and the ATEM Mini Extremes. Yes, 100%. So even like the vanilla, the only thing about the vanilla ATEM is essentially it's designed if you're not going to be streaming. So if you don't intend to stream and you don't need a multi-view out, that kind of thing, so it's more of a basic setup. The ATEM Mini Pro, which has multi-view out and streaming, I think that's a better purchase in this day and age, to be honest. But yes, so the only thing that limited is the 1080. So 4 inputs, 1080, so that's the thing. It doesn't do 4K, it will never do 4K because, it'll probably melt through the table if you're trying to do 4K and want something this size, and we see how hot these get already. But the ATEM Mini line doesn't really need much more oomph, and what they did was they made the Extreme, and the Extreme had features that weren't found in some of the 4K models. So they actually did cram the Extreme with some features that people were asking for, like Super Source, obviously. We probably won't see a 4K version in this form factor. The 4K versions, we may see a 4K version in the TV production, that kind of size, where it's a bit more of a 3 times the size of an Extreme, essentially. But I don't think we're going to see any 4K in this kind of form factor, especially in the vanilla mini and the not the non-extreme version.
You go, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic and this big run on USB, SDI, HDMI capture devices, we were looking at UTAPs from AJ that were $300. So I mean, for the same price, you're getting a switcher. And the other thing is that's a lot of fun for teachers is that it's got a keyer that's built in that would have been $2,000 a few years ago. So an Ultimat upwards of over $2,000. Ultimat DV was $2,000 back in the day, and so that's a lot of fun for teachers to have kids explore green screen. So I think it's a fabulous value for $295.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because a lot of times. When I'm looking at what we're doing and the conversation that we're having, we are sometimes so far ahead of regular people. I'm going to say regular people. And I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to pull some people along with us. And so that's why I asked a question about the ATEM and the ATEM Pro, because I think that might still be a possibility for teachers and small houses of worship going forward. And so that's why I asked the question. But thank you all for your responses.
Well, I think that it would behoove many small organizations, large organizations, and educational organizations to continue to work on how to make video work with what they're doing. How to broadcast it, how to make that work. Even though a lot of people have gone back. I mean, I think the thing that we're seeing in the news recently is that things could get a little more hectic this fall again. And while and it may continue to do this for a while. So I think that one of the things that that people have to keep on thinking and rethinking is, are they going? And it's not just nowadays. It's not just COVID. It's inflation, and it's heat. So there's a lot of things that are kind of challenging the idea of everyone getting into one place. And so I think that it doesn't mean that everyone has to do it all. We don't have the emergency that we had before. But I think that what generally happens is if you get a shock, the temptation is to go back to what you did before. But to take that as a lesson of that could happen at any point in time at this point, and that we keep on building muscles and building processes. The smart organizations will continue to build processes that allow them to go virtual relatively seamlessly if and when that's needed. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and Tony, I know your heart is in helping others, and the realization of just giving. I was thinking some of us have upgraded and still have the old system that could be donated, but I realized that's only the equipment. The knowledge of how to use it is also the challenge as well. So if you have a piece of equipment that you are going to gift or share, make sure the knowledge goes somehow with it as well, and that you help support that, because as we know, the hardware is only usually 20% of the expense. The knowledge of how to use it's really where the money goes.
Next question.
Tony Mobley is back with a question. He's from Noonan, Georgia, by the way. Alex, please share Shoot app one more time.
I'll go with David.
I love that I'm Alex now. That's just fantastic.
You raised your hand. I was
know,
like, why should I show it?
No, I didn't want to take your thunder. Actually, the reason
I'd like you to take my thunder.
Actually, the reason I wanted to jump in is because I'm not sure Alex even knows about this latest addition. Yeah. So he's been updating this pretty regularly. This is just this is on my iPad. You can see my ceiling. Right over here, you can see there's the option to turn on or off the telestration that you have. You've got the framer on there. But one of the really cool things that he just added is that if you draw a line and hold it and say, hello, it will actually take that input and create text for you. And if you do a smaller line, smaller, it'll make the text even smaller. So it is reactive to the size of the line you draw. And he just added multiple languages, which is not working on mine right now. But he added multiple languages so that you can actually telestrate and add text in multiple languages also, which is pretty fun.
I really love that Shoot is taking this, instead of trying to go at Filmic Pro, which has got all of its stuff about being a filmmaker's whatever. Shoot is just adding utility. These are utilities of things. I want to put this as part of what I'm doing. I want to put some overlays or draw on it or whatever. And so that utility it's finding its own place, which I'm pretty excited about. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Searching for Shoot in the App Store is sometimes hit and miss. The proper...
Sorry, I saw what you did there.
Yeah, it's a bad shot. There's my screen share. Shoot Pro Webcam and Telestrator. That's the file name you want to look for. And it is fantastic. The guy's on the Discord, too, if you like it.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So there's another thing that Shoot makes that's actually free. Or their app is actually free on the phone, but I think you want to give them the money at least once to unlock all the current features. And of course, every time there's a new feature, you can just give them money, subscribe, one more time. So it's pretty cool how they've got that. You pay once and you can keep it, then you can unsubscribe. But when you unsubscribe, you don't get the new features until you pay again. So I like that feature. But the driver, so the driver that runs on Mac OS is free. If you download it, then essentially you plug your iPhone into, you don't need the Shoot app. You plug their driver in, you install their driver onto your computer, you plug in an iPhone via USB, now you can screen share via USB, which means you can now use Filmic Pro, which I personally like to use Filmic Pro as my camera. The only thing Shoot does was just telestration, which is pretty cool. But I like to use Filmic Pro plugged into my Mac with just a USB, and I control the Filmic Pro with a remote app. So essentially it's a webcam. Now this will be a moot point come September, of course, because Apple's doing this themselves. But at the moment, so if you get the Shoot app driver for macOS and you plug in your phone via USB, you will simply see it's a screen share via USB. There's not too many other ways of doing this. It's quite ingenious that they've done that. And that's free. That driver's free. You just go to the Shoot website and just follow the links to figure out how to get Shoot into Zoom. And I'll say, download the driver. Once you download the driver, you'll realize it's just a screen share. So it's a pretty cool feature for free.
And that guy is Michael Forrest, by the way. And Michael is part of our community and responds quickly. The frame in there is the Fenwick framer. And so, but Michael is definitely pays attention to what we're asking for. It's something that if you have ideas, he's in our Discord, and he definitely is aggressively moving this down the path. It's really great to see what he's working on. Next question.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Follow up to yesterday, looking for software to help catalog and keyword the thousands of video clips I have for my personal use, mostly family, grandchild, and vacation clips.
Go ahead, Bill.
So what you're, I think, looking for is either a DAM or a MAM, a digital asset manager or a media asset manager. There's slight differences between those two approaches. What you don't want to do is just go into Google and cite, video collection manager or something like that. There's tons of people who want to help people organize their home movies, and you really want to get more granular than that and dig into being able to find assets. Inside that catalog, there are digital asset managers like CatDV and other things that will allow you to take everything that you put into it and keyword it for instant retrieval. So look at those two search things, and you should find great suggestions. Some of them are paid, some of them are free, but there's a lot out there.
Go ahead, Tom.
You'll probably be surprised that Adobe Lightroom will do this, while I wouldn't use it for video editing because I prefer a little deeper features. The keyword search, the ability to catalog and manage your library, it's very deep.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to suggest Photos. So with Photos, you want to do something first. So you want to hold down Option, then click on Photos, then Create New Library. So this library is just going to be filled with video clips. It doesn't have to be part of your main library. It doesn't get uploaded to iCloud because those video clips will take up your iCloud storage. So when you create a new library, only one library gets synced with iCloud. So this library will not be synced, but it can be a catalog. Now what Photos does, it will see all the faces. So you can actually catalog via faces. It will do all this in the background. But you can also do keywords, frames, and also if you have any geolocation data, use maps. So you get all the benefits of Photos, but Photos now has very deep video integration, including video editing. But you can also do all the filters that you'd put onto Photos, you can now put onto videos. And another thing about Photos that we found out in After Hours is that if you drag in a 1 hour documentary that's H.264, put it into Photos, and then just drag it out to the desktop, it will instantly encode it in about 15 seconds to H.265. This is a 1 hour file. we can't figure out how it's doing it because if we put it through compressor, it takes like maybe 15 minutes. It's taking 15 seconds. So we're scratching our heads in After Hours trying to figure out. But Photos is probably one of the best places for cataloging personal videos like this. But do make a new album. So you have to hold down Option, then click on Photos, and then create new album, or it's not album, it's technically library. Create new library, name it, and that library will not get synced to the cloud. So it won't use up your data in the cloud. Very important. And once you do that, then essentially Photos in the background will do all of this AI stuff to find people, find locations, timeline, all that kind of stuff. And that's an amazing catalog in its own. And then you can start going in and tagging yourself. You can put in manual tags and stuff like that as well. So I'd suggest Photos.
Mitchell?
I use this program called JRiver Media Creator. It's a $25 program that's kind of open source, but you have to pay for it. And it has very, very deep metadata, especially for video. Plus, it'll play it in sequence. You can make little shows. I also manage my entire audio library, which is 10,000 songs, using its JRiver, is what it's called.
Let's go to the next question.
Timo Gallegos from Austin, Texas. Great panel today. Thank you. Does anyone use an analog mixer in your audio chain? And if so, why?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I am not using an analog mixer. I am going through a Sound Devices 7440 into my interface via AES. But in terms of how, you would need to send a reference level from your analog mixer into your analog audio interface. Say you can set an oscillator, for example, to what's popular usually is 1 kilohertz at 0 VU, and when you see that at your audio in your audio interface, you'd want to calibrate it so that that 0 VU also shows up as 0 VU in your audio interface. Or if you're looking at it in the digital realm, 0 VU typically would be set to minus 20 dBFS.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, behind me, I do have a hybrid radio station console. And hybrid meaning it'll take analog inputs and it has digital and it has a matrix in it. It's made by a company called Wheatstone. And to Mickey's point, I would be very careful setting your 0 dB on a hybrid machine because 0 dB and clipping on analog is a whole different beast when it comes to digital.
Go ahead, Carl.
So yeah, I have a handful of analog mixers and an analog console actually as well. So I use mine for synthesizers because all my analog synthesizers, I don't want to put them into a digital mixer and then listen to them after they've been, going through an AD converter. So I keep mine completely in analog realm. Essentially, mainly the thing you need to be careful of with analog is putting too much processing in the chain. You're just going to be increasing noise, essentially, because essentially each part of an analog mixer is going to be introducing noise. And this is kind of one of the benefits to a digital mixer, like an X32 or a Behringer Flow or anything like that, is you only have the noise coming in the analog stage. Once you're into digital stage, then you have latency and other problems, but you don't have the noise problems that you'll get with an analog console. Even like an SSL console. SSL consoles, if you take a look at their specs, is what's the noise level when you're running one channel versus what's the noise level when you're running 32 channels simultaneously, you'll see there's a massive difference. There is an increase in noise when you're running multiple channels. So be aware of that. But analog consoles or analog mixers are really good because there's zero latency. So that's hence really why I use them for synthesizers, is because when I'm playing them, I want to hear, even if it's all mixed through a big pipeline. I have a 16-channel mixer that is just zero latency because it's just completely analog and it's all balanced in. So that's beautiful. Every input is balanced.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not using it now because I'm using the RodeCaster Pro too, but for several years here on office hours, I was using the old Samson Mixpad MX124FX, which is a USB interface analog mixer, and I got a lot of compliments on the sound of it, so I think it does a reasonably good job. The preamps are not as quiet as the sound devices, but they're certainly good enough for a podcast and Zoom. And it gives you FX. And another nice thing, it has the USB interface built into it, and it gives you side tone, so you can hear yourself back into your ears in a Zoom podcast, as well as going out over the USB.
And Mickey?
Courtney, whenever you say the word FX, I kind of expect to hear a delay when you say that. Just over the years of you saying that model name or that model number. Just want to clarify with what Mitchell mentioned earlier. It's important to know the different scales of metering. Analog meters versus digital meters. The digital usually being full scale, where 0 is clipping. But in the analog realm, 0 VU, if you look at it from the digital point of view, if you have it with 20 dB of headroom, 0 VU is minus 20 dBFS, far from clipping.
And I was trying to think of the last analog board that I've used in production, and I believe it was a Neve 8048, which I would highly recommend if you can put one into your house. It sounds amazing. All right, but I think that was the last analog board I had in line for something that we've done. Next question.
Next question from Laura Thompson in Beaumont, Texas. Has anyone seen Audio Fetch for assisted listening? It sends to a smartphone and serves houses of worship specifically, as well as other venues.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I have not, but I took a look at their website, and the interface of their smartphone app looks very, very similar to the app of that Listen technology uses, because they have different systems. The most popular one, what Guy showed earlier, that transmits in RF, either 72 megahertz or 124. But they do have a system that broadcasts over Wi-Fi to apps, and it's quite similar to what I saw on Audio Fetch's website.
Good, Courtney.
Well, that's interesting. I was going to ask how it achieves that with zero latency, and if it's transmitting over Wi-Fi directly to an app, and the app is decoding the Wi-Fi directly, that'd probably be pretty low latency since it doesn't have to go up to the cloud and to a server and back to your phone.
You know, the other thing with assisted technologies, a lot of times you don't need it to be the latency can be a little higher. It doesn't have to be zero latency because a lot of times what these are being used for is language, and language is already going to have a human latency of someone translating it. So it's not like it can actually be a little higher than you would expect before it's problematic for folks. Go ahead, Mickey.
Sorry, I just want to correct myself this time. I mentioned earlier 124. The other system from Listen Technologies is 214.
Next question.
Next question from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. When using SDI to HDMI converters to bring cameras into an ATEM Mini, is it a good idea to put a rack mount HDMI panel in the mix to avoid wear and tear on the switcher?
Well, what I would definitely say is that anytime you're going to have a bunch of converters or anything else with a bunch of cables, the more you can put things that are going to control the tension on there's no sending it really to. If you wear out one of the HDMIs, I don't know if you send it to, I guess within the warranty, you can send it to Blackmagic, but once it's out of warranty, there's no way to fix it. So it's just not going to, they're just going to send you so I think that you definitely want to take care of your HDMI inputs and protect. And this is a general rule for everything going into your precious equipment, is to not have a lot of things getting pulled in different directions. It's usually one of the quickest ways to kind of destroy your devices. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're using a SDI to HDMI converter into the ATEM Mini, by rule, that connection between the converter and the ATEM Mini will not be changing. So you'll only be plugging stuff in and out of the SDI, the B and C connectors on the SDI input of the converter. So you wouldn't necessarily need a separate rack mount. Just expose the SDI inputs to the converters to the back and run the HDMI cables internally in a cabinet so that they're not ever messed with. Because the weakness in the connectors is the HDMI connector is the weakest. The B and C connectors can break loose if you're, messing with them a lot, but those decimators and the other boxes from Blackmagic are pretty robust because the B and Cs are connected to the case directly.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I used to have my ATEM Extreme sitting on a PK1 stand, which was great. It got it up and it was very ergonomic. But the problem is on the back, the HDMI cables were on an angle, so they were being stressed up and down. And I just started getting worried. So I have it so that it goes straight out. I think there's a reason that the ATEMs are flat and you plug in the back. Otherwise, I'd go to a 2ME and stick it in the rack.
And last question for the first hour.
Nick Pavlinak from Southeast Michigan. I'm looking for the best bang for the buck photo scanner. Many family photos to scan, hopefully under $200, or just use my Pixel 3 XL with a tripod.
Go ahead, Carl.
So if we're not talking negative scanning, we're actually talking like prints, then there's only one. This is it. So for some weird reason, Canon, so there was a market for this back in like the early 2000s, and it was mainly found in like places that did photo scanning like big time. So this is it. This is the only one that's available. And all the rest, there are some high resolution flatbed ones, but that means you've got to put a photo in, take it out, photo in, take it out. Here you can just load them up and off you go. This has won so many awards in the European market because it's available in the American market, of course, but it's won so many awards because it's just simply a document scanner. It works like a document scanner, but it's for photos. And it's 600 DPI, or PPI optical resolution, and of course you can interpolate that with your software. But 600 resolution on a 4x6, it's a very high resolution, of course. So that is pretty much the only scanner that will do something that you're thinking of rather than a flatbed scanner. There are very high quality flatbed scanners out there, but that is one photo at a time. That's quite slow.
I'll go with Courtney.
Well, what I use these days is just my multifunction printers. I have two multifunction printers, one from HP and one from Brother, that both have document scanners in them for scanning in images, and they support full color on those document scanners, so they can either flatbed scan or they have a document feeder, and you can feed photos in there at 1200 DPI, and it does a pretty decent job of scanning in photos. I've been very happy with it, and it's built into a lot of the multifunction printers that have a printer, copier, fax altogether.
Good, Bill.
I just wanted to make sure that if you do the Pixel 3 XL or any other camera, just understand that if you don't take care of the geometry between whatever the source is you're shooting and your camera and make sure that it's kind of at an apex point, you will get distortion. And I've scanned a whole bunch of photos with my phone only to go back and find out that it was 15 degrees out of true in terms of the square, and I messed up an entire batch of photos. These flatbeds or feeder scanners, as Carl said, keep things straight, and I'd highly recommend you go in that direction if you have the chance.
Yeah, for me, it's always about time. So if the issue is that the time for me to scan it is very low compared to the time for me to touch it up and deal with it, and I kind of want to scan photos. I want to scan them once. I don't want to have to go back. I don't want to wish that they were higher resolution. I don't want to wish. The scanner that I own for that is a Epson Perfection V600. And so this is a flatbed. So it does take longer to scan those things. It runs at 6400 by 9600 DPI. So it is a very high resolution scanner. It's not more expensive. It's only $299. I'm kind of amazed at how inexpensive these scanners have become. I've spent a lot more on scanners. When I bought it, I was trying to find something more expensive. I was like, there's got to be something better than this, but it really does the job. And it's kind of a buy one, cry once, and you scan it, and you have all the resolution and all the color depth and everything else that you're going to get out of that photo. Like, you're not going to get any more out of an average photo than what this flatbed scanner will pull out at $299. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you do decide to go with the phone as a capture device, you need to set up good lights. You need to set up two lights at 45-degree angles on either side so that they don't reflect off the shiny surface if it's a shiny surface photo. The flatbed scanners that we mentioned automatically take care of that because the source light is automatically controlled at a 45-degree angle to the scanner itself, and so you never have to worry about reflections off a shiny material.
Yeah. All right, changing subjects, going to audio, and we have lots of guests here today. So if you've got audio questions, go ahead and throw those in. I did promise a couple previews. We're going to try this. And mostly it was to force me to figure out how I was going to do this. So we're going to start doing this, and we'll play a couple mics. I'll do a couple microphones for you. So I still haven't I couldn't get the wiring working this morning, so that I can't hear the mic when I do it. Well, these are USB mics. And so so we'll play a couple of them, and you guys will have to tell me what they sound like to you. I did get that working so that we could do that. What we're going to try here, just as a test, and what I'm probably going to do is have a session with Mickey at some point. I have everything that looks correct on my Scorpio, but I still can't hear it, or it's still not coming in. So I was running Dante out and so on and so forth. I'm not going to do it on the show, but we'll do it sometime soon. But I was like a half an hour this morning trying to figure out why it wasn't working. Now, let's see here. So we've got a couple USB mics. We have the Mic Me. This is the one that Courtney's friend uses. We have the Earthworks. This is what David Brady uses. And we have the MV7, which is what I use for sending out to folks. So we're going to take a kind of play with this a little bit, and let me. And you still hear only one mic, right? You just hear my main mic. And unfortunately, I also realized this morning that my voice is not probably at 100%. So again, we'll give my voice another week to sort out its issues. But let's see here. Let me get a loop back here. All right. So now I'm going to turn off my Scorpio. Okay, I'm going to try to get this about roughly the same distance. I am working on a stand. I got one of those Elgato stands. I'm going to try to put each one on. This is the part we're still trying to figure out. All right. So turn this off. So this is the, can you hear this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Earthworks. This is, and I can't think of the model name right now, but this is I like to call it the David Brady mic. So this is the David Brady mic, and then we'll switch back to my Neumann. And this is the Neumann mic. So this is the Neumann mic here. Now, the Neumann mic has the advantage that it has noise assist on it. So you might hear a little bit of fan in the background. That's not the mic's problem. In fact, I could probably turn that off if I wanted to. Anyway, I'm not gonna, we'll do that when we do the fine test. So anybody's input on what it sounds like?
Sounds like you might be pushing a processor a little bit with the Earthworks.
So I can turn it down.
But it sounds good. It sounds pretty good.
This is turned down a bit. Does that sound better?
There's good presence.
It has a little better high end, I think, a little crisper high end than the Neumann does. Maybe it's just your angle, but you have to be right on axis with it to get the crispness.
Yeah. So if we turn it here, we'll turn it like this, and so
now you're going.
It comes right off, and
it's super cardioid. So
yeah. So
on axis, it sounds pretty good. As Courtney says, higher end of the presence. So your 6K up on that higher end, it sounds very good.
Yeah, there's no bottom to it though.
Right, so it's a little thinner as far as that goes. Mickey,
it's a little bit more natural. I wouldn't say thinner.
I
would say natural. It's like I'm sitting in the room with you rather than microphone radio voice.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
So
I'd definitely say it has an increase in presence. If I were going to use it in a show, if I needed a mic for a show that's not going through someone who's mixing, I think I would prefer to go with that because it would cut through more right from the get-go.
Right.
But I think for my taste, it's maybe a little too sharp.
Mm-hmm.
But not bad.
I would be concerned with any talent that has a problem with S's or articulation. If they're a little wet in the mouth, I would think that Earthworks would emphasize that.
So if I use a lot of words with seashells and you hear a lot of sibilance,
it's just definitely more present in that upper mid-range and high end than the first mic was by a substantial amount.
Because there's more presence, the sibilance will just have more of an amplitude.
Yeah. Right.
It's also not pushing proximity effect, so it sounds a little more natural because of that.
And I don't know if it doesn't really make it's not really a proximity. It's pretty much the same, just louder.
Yes, it's louder.
There we go. Okay, so let's try another one here. So this is, again, what we're doing today is this is a little preview of what we're going to do. We'll pick at this. We'll get this much more organized in a week or two. But I figured it would be a nice little preview here. So hold on one second here. So I'm going to turn this off. Okay, now I'm going to turn the Scorpio back on while I swap mics. And the next one we'll try is the MV7. Let's see here. And this is the one we use a lot right now. Oh, so now I'm going to So this is the MV7. So we are glad that Ofan is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for, and we have matched our rackets to these balls. We will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Thoughts?
Little bump around 3K compared to the TLM.
It's a bit peaky, definitely less lower end than the Earthworks.
And let me, the tricky part with all these USB mics is that they all actually have, they all have software, and I'm just trying to see if I think I have it on here. Hold on. Sure, the motive. Because one of the things that's important, like I know with the MV7, is to make sure that that I've set it correctly to where it needs to go. So right now, the EQ, this is the EQ at its base. This is at flat EQ.
Flat EQ, yeah.
This has got a low roll off here. So this has got the low roll off, there. This is presence boost. So this is a little bit more present, more theoretically. And then this is the presence boost with the high pass. So there's a couple different options there. I tend to leave everything flat. So this is the flat, that's there.
Very little difference with your voice. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, speaking
so,
voice anyway. A singing voice would be very different, but speaking voice, yeah.
Well, and
but it is interesting.
This
Go
is
ahead.
the MV7 with Sky's voice at about the same distance, and also with the flat EQ present. But I don't have anything to compare it to other than Alex's.
Well, and I think it's useful. I mean, I think that's why I kind of wanted to do a bunch of mics in the same place, because that way we can compare them with the same relative processing there. So again, this is what you're listening to now is the TLM 103. Is it the 103 or 102? I can't remember.
You have a TLM 102.
I have two.
To me, the difference is when you switch to the other mic, I felt I wasn't hearing all of your voice the way I was with the Neumann. The Neumann seemed like everything was switched from the bottom end all the way up to the top end.
Right.
And it seemed very realistic. When you
and we have to
the
be
other mic, it seemed like there were some things that I heard in the first one that I was missing.
And we always want to be fair. The Neumann is a $600 mic, and this
Absolutely.
is a $250 mic, and so it's anyway. So yeah, excuse me. So back to the MV7. This is the MV7. I think it's actually a pretty solid mic, though, as far as now.
And you have the gain all the way up on that MV7
I do.
from the microphone itself.
Yeah, I do. It is a pretty low gain. So if I don't, as a USB mic, if I don't turn it all the way up, it won't get to where we need it to go, in my experience.
Just want to ask, as you jump between the USB mics, are you turning RGL sound back on? Because
mine's
Zoom
off. Hold on, I don't know why mine's almost always on.
It automatically turns off whenever you switch to different audio interface.
Oof. Okay. All right. So
that's significant.
Yeah. So there you go. So this is with the MV7 with it on, and it shouldn't be a problem. I think now, because it thinks it's the same audio interface. I think it's just when I switched from Scorpio to the loop back, so I shouldn't have to do it again. We'll find out. So anyway, so this is the MV7. We'll go back. Yeah, and then this is the TLM 10. So you couldn't hear much difference when the original audio was off, but you hear more of a difference now with the original audio on.
I wouldn't use that low roll-off unless you've got air cons and earthquakes nearby.
Right. Yeah, I'm not using it right now. This is flat. So this is the MV7. This is the MV7 on with original audio on. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm just hearing that now with original sound on. I think specifically with your voice, the roundness of the bottom end of the MV7 is a bit more flattering for your voice. Mm-hmm. But of course, from person to person, that's going to be different.
Right.
I'm hearing a bit of like electronic sound.
You will, because
a little tiny hum.
I am not willing to. You probably hear it from the room. I'm not willing to rebuild or start turning things on and off on my main mic, and my main mic has the noise assist on. So that is the one unfairness, is that it'll sound a little quieter, and I will turn that off when we do the official test. But no, let's go ahead and switch to one more here. So now I'm going to switch to the mic me. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, with these Shure's scratch super easily. I think I mentioned this before. I just put it in a case with something else and ended up with like a ton of scratches on the front. This fixes it. Just in case you're wondering, it's just straight lines. Straight lines down. I think it's a little shinier. It was some very, very careful Sharpie work. I was very proud of my handiwork there. All right, so let's go.
Alex, when you go to the Mic Me, it needs about a few seconds to adjust to your voice when you turn it on, when the green light comes on the top.
So I have to talk for a couple minutes, or
just not a couple of minutes, just a couple of seconds, because it sets the gain structure.
Okay, so let's. Now I'm going to switch. Do you have one, or do you just?
I do indeed, right here.
Okay. All right, so it's got a problem that I'll show you in a second, at least the one that I have. It's very worrisome. All right, so this is the Mic Me. And I don't, I can't hear it, so you'll have to tell me.
It's a bit too hot.
Sounds ungrounded too.
Okay. Yeah, this is the thing that I noticed with it is this. Can you hear that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a ground loop.
That is not good.
It's the Morse code hour.
I never noticed that with mine. I guess because I don't hold it. I have it on a stand.
So it's got some kind of grounding issue. It is. Let's see. It's got. I might be able to bring it down manually too here. So is that getting lower? I'm just talking into it. It's not.
Don't put your hand on it while you're talking because it gives.
Oh, that's right. So now I think I may have. No, it's still pretty loud. I haven't figured out how to control it yet. So, to be all fair, it's the only concern I have with it is that I will have to do the test relatively soon. Because of the grounding issue, I'm unclear that I would keep this mic. But it gives you at least a sense of it. It sounds like a little. As I said, it sounds pretty bright, like when I was listening to it before.
Yeah, it's peaky, high end. It's made for intelligibility, not for faithful reproduction.
Right. So for intelligibility, it might work as long as you don't touch it, because it's got a short. So somewhere.
Got a hefty, 60 hertz hum.
Yeah, so
it seems like the case isn't grounded properly or something, so there may be a trace that got broken or something.
Plastic
it's plastic?
Case.
Wow.
It's plastic.
And it's doing that even if you touch.
And it's a USB interface?
Yeah, it's a USB.
So the grounding is coming in the microphone itself before the A/D in the USB interface.
Yeah. So this one may not make to the test because I may not want to lose it or scratch it because I think it has to go back. So, but I think that, but otherwise, I think we've been. The other ones, I think, what's this is opening up is I think that this loop back thing kind of works. I got to figure out a couple things to make it a little bit smoother. I got to make sure I can hear myself back in it. I may want to hear myself back into it. I may let you just tell me. Here's the problem, is that when I run it through, I do have another version of this that lets me listen to it. And the problem is that it's just enough delay when these things aren't at zero delay. It's just enough delay that it kind of rings my bell. Like you'll hear me talk really slowly.
Does it have a headphone output on the back of the microphone?
It does. So I've thought about I could have all the mics there and I could plug them all into some kind of thing that would let me listen to it. So I'm thinking about that as well. All of these mics, all the USB mics have a zero latency headphone out. So I could theoretically put that into a mixer or just swap it over when I swap each one. I'm trying not to. I guess the unplugging and plugging isn't as bad as I thought it would be. So,
well, I'd keep that one. Everybody needs something they can use as a bad example.
Yeah. And also, most of the ones that have a headphone out on them mix the USB return with the low latency preamp from the microphone itself, so you get both. You hear both.
You get all kinds of things going on. So, anyway, I want to research this one a little bit more because I just kind of turned it on, plugged it in, and so which I did with all of these. So, I mean, except for I will admit the MV7, because we use it for what's unfair about the MV7, although it's set to its base things, so it's not like I'm doing anything special. I just know it better because we use it for our kits, and so we test them all before they go out.
You're still speaking on the mic, me, by the way.
Oh, sorry, Mitchell. Hold on. There we go. Now we're back to this. All right.
You know what's interesting is that you're comparing it to a very fine.
Well, we compare the other ones the same way.
But I'm just saying it's hard to come off of a good example of a microphone to a subpar one. But for example, look at the mic Mickey has here. That's a $5,000 plus microphone that he's got in front of him.
Yeah, but that's also why I wanted to do it all in one place. Is we're gonna do and I'm gonna. I am going to, when we do the mic test mixed in with these, I mean, this will definitely, I was kind of curious what would happen if we just played with the mics for a little bit. This will definitely take an hour for us to go through these. I will also add other mics to it that we can kind of just listen to. So SM58, a PR40, other ones that I have laying around, and so I'm going to look for the other ones that I made that may make sense. In addition to these, there was a couple other suggestions that I'm looking. I think I have an AT2020 or whatever laying around somewhere. I'm trying to find it before I buy it. But I think that we're getting kind of a grouping of mics that at least give us, I think it's an interesting, I've been wanting to do this for a while with many, many mics for, to get them all in one place, all at one time, because the problem is that like if we do, some people are doing stuff like this on YouTube where it's like every week or whatever. The problem is my voice and my environment is different every single day, and so I kind of feel like we want to get all these mics in one place, or not all of them, but a larger group of mics in one place at one time, so that we can just kind of, and not in a sound booth, but really in a, like, this is in my office, and the only thing I'll change again is turning off noise assist for that. So
it might be worth, of course, this would be something done offline, but it might be worth doing a multi-track recording of all mics at once. I mean, your Scorpio has 16 preamps in it. So we could record there and get the USB mics into the Scorpio via Dante through loopback.
Or it's just a matter of figuring out where to put them all, but where they're
a single polyphonic file, a single polyphonic.
No, but I'm saying where to put all the mics physically, so that they're all like in a fair position there. Again, this is kind of something we're going to probably over the next year get really good at this with mics, with cameras, with lights, with lots of other things. We want to get more. I think one of the things that I'm hoping to do as we kind of move forward is not just have general best practice ideas and answer people's questions, but this is just the very first drop into, we need some kind of lab, like we're going to start labbing out ideas. Right now it's a very informal lab, but at some point we start building towards something where we can start going, okay, well, absolutely, this is what we want, or at least these are the rankings of those.
Well, and to Mickey's point of modifications, one of the best shootouts of cameras that I saw was about 5-6 years ago, and they gave the specific camera to a specific DP and said, do this in this same exact environment. And then they brought the iPhone in, then they brought the Arri in, and then they brought the Canon in, and then they said, here's the same parameters. And now, what was interesting afterwards, they had the audience give response back of what they felt. And what was interesting was the TV guy says, well, it's too orange, because they're used to seeing things in a certain blue sort of way. So it was also the audience, what they're accustomed to as well.
Yeah, there's also a level of ease of use. Like, there's part of me that's like, well, I haven't tested this little one very much yet, but also kind of like what goes through my head is if it doesn't come out of the box in a way that someone can just plug it in and use it, I have problems. Like I have, like as someone who's, because what I'm thinking about always is what am I going to send, to, because the one thing that I've kind of gotten into is sending a mic. If I'm going to send one thing, I'm going to send a mic out, to make that work. All right, I have to run to a unexpected meeting. So Bill is going to take over. And we have 9 audio questions and audio experts here, so I think we're well. But this is a good little initial test of our little mic ideas, and so I'm going to hand it off to Bill, and then let everyone continue to answer all the audio questions. If you've got audio questions, hurry up and get them in before the end of the hour. All right, I'll see you guys.
Thanks, Alex. Good to have you back. Let's move on to our first question from the general. Go ahead.
All right, Sky Gleason, Seattle, Washington. What are some basic rules about mic placement?
Let's start with Mickey, then move on to Carl. Mickey, go ahead.
I'd say the best mic placement, generally speaking, would be the one that gets you closest to the product you're trying to get. There are times when, maybe not being right on axis might be the sound you're looking for. So use your ears, move the mic around, and see what gets you the closest to, the final product you want to deliver. An example with that would be, say, Foley. You don't want Foley to always be right up close, right on axis. You want to make it sound a bit more natural. So you pull the mic out a bit, you take it off axis a couple inches, and that gets you closer to the sound that you want to get for the final mix. Use your ears. For most of what we talk about here, we're typically trying to get a better signal to noise ratio with that in mind, closer is usually better.
Hey, Mickey, I'm curious. What's the first thing you listen for when you're listening to a new signal?
Sorry, can you expound on?
Yeah, absolutely. We say a lot, use your ears, but we don't really give people an idea of what kinds of things you're focused on when you move into that mode of analyzing a sound that's hitting your headphones or the speakers or wherever you're mixing. Is there a thing that you've learned to listen for that solves a lot of problems for you?
It varies from, depending on what you're recording. For voice, usually frequency response, proximity effect. For other kinds of sounds, maybe you want to take into account how that specific mic captures transients for something like, music recording or, again, Foley. And as you move the mic around, the response to specific, how fast the mic responds to transients changes. So those are a couple of things to look out for.
Cool. Thank you. Carl.
So it depends. So if you're recording an orchestra, you're going to be probably about 3 meters above the orchestra with a decketry. You can put spot mics in the orchestra, of course. If you're recording us, like we're here on office hours, then like we're talking like 6 inches, less than a foot. As Mickey said, there is one really cool way of doing this, and that's actually getting headphones and actually walking around and placing the microphone in different places. So this is kind of good if you're trying to mic a drum or a bass drum. So bass drum, there's no way you're going to be able to tell, but if you put on some closed headphones, they're not necessarily noise cancelling, but it's closed back headphones, and actually put your bass drum mic there and listen to the bass drum playing, you can, just moving 6 inches in and out of the bass drum or left and right, you'll get very different sounds. So auditioning the sound with the microphone in real time is a really good way of actually understanding how microphones work, how the proximity effect works, those kind of things. Because if you place it and then go listen to it and then move it again, then go listen to it, if you're doing them independently, you're not going to get it. But if you put headphones on and actually audition live while you're trying to do it, you will need the person to play, or you'll need a robot to play or make sound. Foley's kind of a little bit interesting because Foley, you actually want it to fit the scene. So as Mickey said, you don't want necessarily Foley to have really good presence, because like if someone's creaking a door, we're not sitting 6 inches away from that door as it's opening. You may want to put the mic on the other side of the room and have a creaky door, and that'll give the natural reverb of your Foley stage as well. So auditioning is really important, and as Mickey said, just put on some headphones and audition.
That's interesting. I'm going to challenge you with the same thing. Is there a circumstance you went in where the mic placement that you thought you were going to get really good results out turned to be not the right one at all, and you had to really break your own expectations?
Yeah, so snare drum. So snare drum, if you put a snare drum on a microphone on top and you put one on bottom, if they're exactly the same distance from each, you'll find that you'll get a sound. But you'll actually, if you want to get like a different sound, like we're using that second mic underneath to actually get more of a natural reverb sound, you can actually start moving that mic away from the bottom of the snare drum, maybe 6 inches, maybe a foot away. It seems like a long way away considering the other one's maybe only 1 inch away from the surface. But when you put those two sounds together, you get a much larger sound that you may be going for. If you want a very close sound, you just use a top mic. If you want a larger sound from the snare drum, use both mics. But having both exactly the same distance, which puts them in phase, which is kind of good. But by being in phase, you don't get any kind of reverb or natural, time delay. By moving it 6 inches to 9 inches away from the bottom skin of the snare drum, when you bring up the second microphone, which is underneath, you'll get this natural large sound to the snare drum. And that's something I put in both the same distance. It doesn't sound as large. Move the bottom one away, it sounds much larger. So
cool.
That's trial and error.
Cool. Thanks. Mitchell.
Yeah, it depends on the microphone. I just saw Alex testing this little mic me out. And if I were, based on what I saw Alex doing, were to place this microphone, I would place it in the trash can.
A little harsh, but okay. Moving on. Next, Courtney.
Yeah, there's not so many rules. More like guidelines, like the pirate rules. No, it depends on what you're wanting to record. If you're working with something like a 416, like Bill's using, I like that mic placed underneath better than above, because it's very directional. And I think there's a good deal of head resonance that comes out the old nostrils. So if you're above, you're going to miss that resonance that's coming out of your nose, goes straight down, and you miss it with the directional microphone. If it's underneath, you're going to gather more of that. Also, you get a little more chest resonance from underneath. So if I'm recording voiceover or something where I need a nice rich sound, I prefer underneath than overhead miking.
Also, you have to pay attention to what's in the background. If you're outdoors or if you're somewhere where there's noises in the room, a directional mic will pick up the person and everything it's pointed at that's in its field of view, its audio field of view that it's pointed at. So bear in mind, if you've got a noisy air conditioner in the back, arrange it so that the directionality of the mic is the null side of the microphone is pointed toward the air conditioner. So you're not amplifying the air conditioner, the noise source as well. Also stay away in condenser microphones. You got to worry about the proximity effect, which is when you get too close to the microphone, it accentuates the lower frequencies too much, and it becomes unnatural sounding. Sounds like somebody who was holding your head right to their mouth, right to your ear and speaking into it.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, the answer is not too close and not too far. So you'll see, like in the West Wing, they used what we call a clean background plate. So getting that mic as close as you can to the subject, of course, is going to give you great sound. So in shots where you can control the production, even a boom mic placed in the scene, but then painted out later. So to do this, you basically take the talent out and you can just shoot it without the mic out, and then you shoot that. It's called the clean background plate. Then in post, you could just crop it back in, and then that's gone. The other thing is DPA has some really great diagrams on their website about microphone placement. The one that shocked me when we had our DPA rep in was placing a microphone right on the forehead, and they found that was the best sound for they're doing Broadway plays. And so if you go to a Broadway play, you'll notice where that microphone's located. They used to, put them. Actually, sometimes they put them in the hair and wigs. They burrow them under clothing, but sometimes you can get clothing rustle depending on how you rig it. So take a look at that diagram. It just depends on the show, if the mic can be seen and how close that lens is.
Okay, we're already pushing our time, but we're going to go through because this is, I think, fascinating. We're learning a lot. Sky's next, then Mitchell, and then we'll finish up with Mickey.
Again, I just want to say thank you because I knew this was a very generic question, and I knew it depends was the first answer, but I love Guy Cochran's, the Goldilocks, waiting for it to be just right. So, no, I specifically was curious about, when you're in the field, I'm used to having an audio guy and the difference between pointing it up or pointing it down. And Courtney, again, detailed some of that. So this is awesome conversation about the details of what it means by it depends.
We're going to continue the awesomeness with Mitchell.
And I just want to come in with a serious comment. When I'm testing mic placement or microphones, it's a combination of a pair of headphones that I'm used to hearing, and it's my voice coming back to me. My voice is my instrument, and I think Bill would agree, or anybody who does voiceover work. How I sound coming back is how I end up placing a mic. So if I'm doing, kind of a small sounding in a world, one of those kind of spots, you know how to work the microphone in and out. So there is no one placement that works right for it. It's just the right combination.
And Mickey to finish us up.
Yeah, I just wanted to expound on something that was mentioned by Guy about what has been typically called busting the frame, and this was on House of Cards, and that was actually brought forth by the series producer David Fincher, and he was the one who asked for VFX to spend time and budget on painting out the boom, and a narrative, recording a narrative film or TV show is an example of a situation wherein you are constantly fighting signal to noise ratio. So most of the time, you're gonna try to get that boom right in there, so that you don't have to fail over to your lavaliers, which in most situations don't sound nearly as good.
Amen to that. All right, next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles. Can the panelists compare and discuss sound devices versus Zoom versus Tascam products?
And Mickey's going to weigh in on this first.
As I think many know, I'm a big fan of the preamps on sound devices products. I don't think Zoom or Tascam has any offerings that can compete. In terms of workflow, sound devices, the workflow of their machines have matured so much over the years of experience and being the boxes that have, or the recorders or mixers that have been used on large, more complex sets over the decades. I own a lot of Tascam recorders as well. They are serviceable, but I still usually feed them a line level signal coming from a sound devices mixer. Zoom has gotten better over the years, but I would not recommend Zoom products based on my experience with their basic fidelity. I'm not very happy with them. But yeah, I'd say sound devices, along with other companies like, say, ATEM and Zaxcom, their products in terms of field recording are at a different league.
And Carl Asmussen.
So you'd want to compare like for like. So there are 3 products, one on each company, that are designed to do the same thing. And so that'd be the Mix Pre 6, the H6 from Zoom, and the X8. Now, from this, a new product from Tascam. The X8 is a big step up for Tascam. They've actually got their higher end preamps in there, so and they've got it in a good price too. So it's half the price of the Mix Pre 6. But yeah, the Mix Pre 6 goes a little bit extra on how far you get clean dB on the mic gain. But if you're using condenser microphones, it's not going to be a problem. It's only if you're using dynamic microphones. All 3 of these products are designed for ambisonics. So they're designed to have 4 parity XLR inputs with phantom power, so they can work on ambisonic microphones, or a rig of ambisonic microphones you can set up with maybe some figure 8s. But if you take these 3, essentially they're meant to do the same thing. They're meant to have 4 inputs, XLR, phantom power, and they're meant to all record parity, which means all those inputs are identical in every way. I think that the sound devices would win nearly every spec war, no matter what. The Tascam is aimed at a little bit of a different market. It's a little bit more intuitive to use. That's just the way they've chosen to go. And as Mickey said, I think the Zoom, it's a good budget option, but I think the Tascam now at $500 is a better budget option compared to the Mix Pre 6. That's kind of how you want to compare them. Sound devices goes way up into like the $10,000 range when it comes to field mixers, and they're designed for field recording. Tascam was more of a studio recording company. They still are. So the preamps that are in the new X8 come from their studio recording stuff. And Zoom make products at a price point, and they make products at a price point, and they have a lot of features. There's not a problem with that, but they do make products at a price point so people can afford it. But I think Tascam is going to eat into that market where Zoom is currently sitting, and they may take a few people away from the, especially the four channel input, which is the Mix Pre 6. They may take a few people away from that market as well with sound devices, especially if product availability becomes hard for sound devices. People will start to look at Tascam if they're more available to purchase at half the price.
And Courtney.
Well, I disagree a little bit. I think if you're going to compare the Zoom products, I would not look at the H series. I would look at the F series, which is designed more for production. The F6 or the F8N Pro have better preamps, I think, in them. They're quieter preamps, and they're on par with the sound devices, not quite as clean as the sound devices. Mickey says, as he says, I do have a preference for the sound devices preamps over the Zoom preamps. But they are pretty quiet, and comparatively, for the price difference and the capabilities of that F6 or the F8N, it's quite a capable recorder. It has built-in timecode, which is very accurate. I've tested it. Does broadcast wave files. It records all the right file types and timecode types, and has all the correct metadata stored in the recordings. So I think the F series can compete, and the Tascam I haven't tested as much, so I won't comment on those as much.
Okay, fair enough. I also wanted to just talk a little bit, because I get worried. Mickey and Carl and others here are professionals, and they work at the top, and they don't have any room for anything other than the most professional results. And God bless them, and we learn so much from them about how to get absolute performance out of equipment. But there is another piece to this, and that is, as a voiceover guy, I had probably used 100 different microphones over my career. When I started in the industry, it was whatever they hung in front of me because I was going studio to studio. There were differences. I can hear the differences. I understand the differences. But in each one of the maybe first 200 or 300 professional voiceovers I did, they all got on the air, they all paid me for them, and they all succeeded. That doesn't mean there weren't differences. It just meant that the delta between what they could accomplish and what the optimum wasn't significant enough to stop the work from being accepted and paid for. I believe in both sides of this. I believe you should understand the differences and how to lower that difference between optimal results and acceptable results, because if you don't do that, you're never going to move your career forward. But it's not to say if you can't get this microphone or you can't get that preamp or something that you should stop doing work and trying to learn and improve yourself. The better you get at what you do, the more money you'll have and the more ability you'll have to do work at the level of a Mickey or Carl, but you're not going to start there probably. So I guess I'm just saying, as somebody who wants to produce or be a talent or whatever, don't let the equipment and the fact that you can't achieve perfection stop you from pursuing your dreams. That's not going to be the biggest difference. Mickey's going to weigh in and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, definitely. I think every product has a market, and for us in the community, like my first recorder was a secondhand. What do you call this? Marantz that I bought for $500 US, and it sounds it's laughable how the quality of it. But we all have to start somewhere. But I think, keeping in mind that there is something better to aspire to and step up and, hopefully at some point move up to is important. And along those lines, I think being able to have a perspective of, where each product is in the market, and being able to tell that, okay, what I'm listening to now is sufficient for the work that I'm currently doing, but I have something to move up to when I start to get those bigger projects, bigger clients, higher risk projects.
Amen to that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we've got ourselves in a hole, though, because we've got 14 questions in the queue, and we've only got 15 minutes to deal with them, so we'll get as many as we possibly can. Sorry about that. I just thought that would be interesting for everybody to dive into a little more detail. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. Can we have a quick Inputs for Dummies session? What's the difference between line level and mic level?
Carl's up first. Carl, you go ahead, and if you define it, maybe we can move on.
All right, so I'm going to use a Flow 8. So a handful of people on the panel know what a Flow 8 is, and we've done videos. So essentially a Flow 8 has four major different types of inputs. So if we take a look at what the Flow 8 has, input 1 and 2 is just XLR by itself. And I've got the ohms here. It's really important. We don't talk about ohms here because we don't want to get too into the weeds, but the ohms determines what can be put into this, and it kind of is a buffer between the input gain and the actual device you're putting inside, a microphone or an instrument or a guitar or something. So channel 1 and channel 2 only do XLR, and they have a 10K ohm. Now this is quite a high ohm, but it means that you can actually use some high ohm microphones. Input 3 and 4 are very similar to what you find in the X32, XR18. These are very similar inputs. These are combo jacks. And if you put XLR in, it has a 2K ohm, which is very common in nearly all the equipment that we use here on office hours. You'd find something around 2K ohm. This is all balanced, by the way. And then the TRS balance would be 20K, and this is for line level. And then when we go down to 5 and 8, they are just line level, essentially, and they're going to have the 20K as well. This is quite common. You'd find this for balance. Then we get to the instrument one, and this is where this kind of jumps out at you. So the instrument input, which is 6 and 8, they are TS because the instrument, like guitar, you can have a balanced instrument input as well, but they're 1 million ohms. So this kind of tells you different types of inputs and how they are very different. That's why you can't put a microphone into an instrument input and vice versa. Then once you go on from that, you've actually got how much loudness, how much signal can each input to take. And you actually take a look at channel 1 and channel 2 versus 3 and 4 for XLR. So if you actually look at that, you'll notice that the XLR is completely different. Even though you can plug in same mics, now, of course, 1 and 2 can take fair amount of power, but you can plug in a dynamic mic, but they're very different inputs. And then your TRS, you notice it's 26, which is common for line level, usually around 24. Then the ones below that, 5 to 8, it's 22 dB, and then instrument
Carl,
is 19.
I think I'm going to interrupt here because, as I said, we're running out of time, and I'm not sure that we're still in input for dummies here. Mickey, can you give us a one-sentence difference between line level and mic level?
Not sure if I can do one sentence, but okay, very, very quick. Professional line level plus 4 dBu. Consumer line level minus 10 dBV. Mic level anywhere from minus 30 to minus 40, minus 30 to minus 50 dBu. So mic level is a lot quieter than professional line level. If you feed a signal that is professional line level into an input that is expecting mic level, you're going to distort. So that's where gain staging is important.
Yeah, my dummies thing would be that line level is a lot stronger than mic level, and you should never confuse them. Let's move on because, again, we've got a lot of questions I want to do.
The short answer is 40 dB.
Okay, 40 dB, and that's a lot. That's a logarithmic scale. That is a big difference. Well done. All right, moving on.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. Should I connect a secondary mic to my Zoom H6 as a backup? What should it be? I'm very happy with my PR40.
Mickey?
I think microphones in general are very, very good investments because as long as you take care of them and they are maintained well, they will last a lifetime. So between your microphone or your Zoom H6 that you use as a preamp and audio interface, I think I would rather have a backup to the Zoom H6 than another mic.
There you go. Mics can be very dependable. Next question.
Chris Taylor, Carlsbad, California. Thoughts on Crisp.ai, the USB version of Noise Assist? A quick, ruthless review last night with my son has it installed showed that it did a very good job of removing background music, keyboard clicks, and room reverb.
I don't know if anybody has, nobody's raised a hand, so I guess nobody has a specific experience with this. I will just say more and more plug-in manufacturers are doing something similar to that. I don't know whether they're as good. Noise Assist is great, so is the Cedar system. Courtney, do you have just a quick sentence on that before we move on?
Maybe it's similar to what the NVIDIA RTX noise reduction is. It's an AI-based noise reduction that can remove non-repetitive sounds from the background, like kids talking or stuff that you don't want from your on-mic sounds very competently.
Okay. Hopefully somebody will come back in and we'll know more about that later. Let's go on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael with the Electron Analog Heat MK2 has 4 input sensitivity settings. He's got a bunch of them mentioned there. And he wants to know, in the absence of proper metering on the heat, what settings should I use with a balanced line input?
And Carl, can we do it real quick and Mickey the same thing?
So the lowest one. So essentially what these are is different synthesizers put out different volumes. So an old Moog from the 70s will put out about 10 volts. My Eurorack will put out the 5 volts. Mini Moog will put out about 2 volts. And line level stuff, which is the most common instruments now, will put out about the 1 volt. So that's the whole point of it, because different synthesizers have different voltage outputs. That's why.
Well done. Mickey?
I'm not familiar with this piece of hardware, but if you are feeding an output from this into, say, a mixer or an audio interface, if you are not able to run any sort of reference signal out of it to properly calibrate its output to another device's input, then I would see which of these outputs would bring me closest to the level I want when the input gain or trim of where the signal is going to is set to unity or 12 o'clock. So what gets me closest to 12 o'clock, that's what I would stick to.
Excellent. Next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. Is it possible to add a spectrum analyzer to the test, I think he's referring to the Alex test, to visualize the mic's response?
That's an interesting idea. Mickey wants to weigh in, and so does Carl. Then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I think we could definitely put an RTA in the chain there, and especially if we find a way to get different signals from Alex into the RTA, then we could compare them in real time. But honestly, looking at comparing signals using a spectrum analyzer or an RTA, specifically for for testing microphones, it doesn't really come in handy that much, at least for myself.
Probably because it'd be like reading a description of a spice taste to figure out whether you needed to add more to a recipe. Carl, you want to slip in on that?
Yeah, that's right. So what Mickey says is true. So you could do it, but you need to have the same tone going in. So essentially we're hearing like different presences, but you can actually get that from the instruction manual. So the instruction manual for every microphone will usually have a graph, or it's on there online. You'll find on the website, it will show you the graph to a tone they've put through, and that's a RTA output. I've got a hardware RTA here where I can make one, but for us to do it with, Alex being in his place, it'll be a little bit tricky just to go through Zoom and get an RTA. Although you could get an RTA technically of what's coming out of Zoom, of course. But yeah, it's kind of defeats the purpose if we're just talking into it for vocal stuff.
Let's go to the next question.
Lou Perez, Phoenix, Arizona. Any online resources to teach mic technique you can recommend?
And Carl's going to win.
So outside of YouTube, I'm going to steer more towards printed stuff. So Sound on Sound Magazine's website. Go there, they have a tab up the top called Technique. Touch on the Technique, and then you can click on the tab for microphone, and you'll see 20 years worth of articles that were in their print version and now on the online version of microphone technique.
Excellent place to start. I would also say, put on a set of headphones, put up your microphone, make sure you can hear it clearly, and practice. You will learn. I mean, the first year I did voiceovers, I didn't have much mic technique. I just relied on things. And over the course of the years, I've learned 1,000 techniques, in this microphone, in this space, my P's are too much. I can essentially make them disappear and say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers without literally blowing out any wind. There's 100 little mic techniques that can solve problems, but it requires experience and listening to what you're putting out. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. What are your impressions of the RodeCaster Pro 2 for general podcast or live streaming use?
And Courtney's going to weigh in.
Well, since it was designed for podcaster use, it's very well adapted to that. The one thing that I find tragically missing from it is auto mixing. It does not have an auto mixing. So it's got 4 microphone inputs, but you've got to control the levels. And if you've got 4 people in a room that are kibitzing and speaking up out of turn without any way to mix them competently, where you got to have all 4 mics up equally, it's going to degrade your sound quite a bit for your podcast. So I would like to see an auto mix function built into it. But other than that, it's pretty purposeful built. I don't like the processing very much on it. The Aphex processor that is built in, it adds too much artificiality to it. I'd like better is just to get good microphones close to the individual people. But the routing and monitoring and everything else is really very good and designed for podcasting use. The recording leaves much to be desired, but if you're just recording a podcast, it'll work. It names every file the same: stereo mix, stereo mix, stereo mix. So every time you hit the record button, it creates a file in a new folder with the date and time on it called stereo mix. So if you want to combine a bunch of files or archive a bunch of files, you have to put them in separate folders, which is a problem.
And next question.
Andrew Lipnick in San Francisco. Do you use reference tracks, either music or spoken word, as a tonal benchmark to aspire to?
And start with Mickey, then go to Mitchell.
Yeah, for it's something that I do not do like every day or with every speaker system. But in terms of having a benchmark to aspire to, I repeatedly watch like films like The Conversation, in terms of like the psychology of of mixing and sound design, and how you can work with psychoacoustics and get into the minds of your viewers. In terms of Foley and backgrounds, No Country for Old Men. The Foley and No Country for Old Men. Someday I will get to work on stuff like that.
Mitchell.
Donald Fagan's IGY. It is there for me every time.
Most people I know have something that they know really well, and they've listened to it over and over, and they used to take it into audition speakers, but it's different for everybody, and it depends on whether you're mixing for something like disco where you need a big thump, or you're doing something for dialogue in a movie. Anyway, let's move on to the next question.
Talalik Miguel Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. I find many of the high-end mics in this group to have a harsh upper end frequency response. I know some of this is likely my listening flow, but does Zoom introduce any higher end enhancement?
And let's start with Carl and move on to Mickey.
So Zoom is doing stuff That is true. Generally, Zoom will preserve the higher end frequency stuff because that's where speech is. It will kind of roll off, has like a natural roll off in its own compression algorithm. If you have original sound off, there's a lot of other things going on there as well. But also the higher end mics, they pick up everything. So they'll pick up sibilance. They'll pick up our voice. They'll pick up early reflections in the room. And these early reflections in the room are going to be the higher end stuff. So it's like when you're in like a tiled bathroom, the thing that will ring out the most are the higher end frequencies, not the lower end. And that's kind of what's happening here. We're not all sitting in recording studios, and we're not all going through a mastering EQ as well. So there's a whole lot of things that you kind of get used to in recordings, which we're not going through.
And Mickey, can you do it in 30?
Yeah, definitely with Zoom, no matter what you do, even if you turn original sound on and high fidelity music mode on, it is still going through data compression, which affects, although it's supposedly non-destructive, it still affects the fidelity somewhat. You might also want to take a look at maybe other monitoring solutions. Maybe if other content also sounds pretty harsh for you, then maybe your ears prefer something that's maybe a little rounder. Take a look at the Audio-Technica M50X, just as an example. But yeah, looking when we did frequency sweeps in the past, there was very little deviation, but there was a hard cutoff at around 12 to 15K in terms of what Zoom is transmitting out.
Okay, thank you. We can go over a little tiny bit, so I'm going to try to get through the rest of the list, but let's keep things consistent. Go ahead, Carl. Or not Carl. Next
question.
Yes.
Talalek's back with another question. Best ear training workflow.
And Mickey.
Watch, reference content, good content, and have someone, have other people to discuss it with. And it would be also be helpful to have someone who has, audio in their background to discuss with and throw ideas with what you like, what you didn't like about that specific piece of content. That's how you build your ear. Know how to link what you heard to an idea that you or other people have.
And if you are just brand new in the business and you want to learn the sound of some of the common things, 60 cycle hum, top end splashiness or whatever, there are a few sources out there that used to do those in either record or tape or digital form. I'm sure you could look for ear training on the web and find some of those kind of sources. Next question.
Nick Batt from the UK, been using Zoom PodTrak P4, and it seems to be pretty good for a low-cost device. Plenty of gain, multi-track recording, mix minus. Been using it with phone camera and also for podcast production. Only 44.1 kilohertz, though. Is that a big problem?
And Carl and Mickey are going to end up on this, and go quickly, go.
So 44.1's not necessarily a big problem. It is if you're live streaming with certain things, I may want 48. If it's a recording, not a big problem. Essentially, your output is 44.1. Internally, it could be a little bit higher, but you'd be surprised that nearly all the classical recordings done between year 2000 and 2008 were done at 44.1, all those recordings.
Mickey.
If you are doing any work for sig sound, so meaning sound that goes with video, you would want to do that at least 48 kilohertz. Also, if you're doing I think, Nick, you do a lot of work in music. If you're going to do any Atmos starts at 48 kilohertz.
The other thing I'd notice is if you work in video at all, if you do 44.1, bring that in and don't transcode it to 48 digital videos standard, you can get some timing issues. A 48 kilohertz soundtrack on a regular video and DV can slip out of sync over time. So the pull up and pull down is often automatic in NLEs, but pay attention to that. Let's move on.
Talalek again with a question. When is better to individually mic instruments versus miking how the sound acoustically mixes in a room? Types of music, audience, mood?
Ooh, religious questions here. And we're going to start with Carl and go to Mickey.
So I'm going to use a drum room as an example here because we can do symphony orchestras, but that's getting a bit too much. So in a drum room, yes, you have close mics on your drums and you have room mics, and you have close room mics and near room mics. And the same for piano as well. So pianos, you'll have mics hanging into the piano, then you have room mics. And essentially it's in the mix phase that you choose to mix how much ambient sound coming in from the room mics is put in. So it's actually a creative choice you do later on. But you do want to capture as many different types of mics you think you may use or creatively use, but it's in the mix phase that you'll put your near mics with your room mics, with your far mics, because it gives you essentially a natural reverb.
Mickey.
In most situations, you would mic it both ways. You have your isolated mics for your spot mics for your different instruments, and you would also have multiple room mics. If you had to choose one over the other, think about what you're trying to deliver. If you want to deliver more, say, in an orchestra situation, if you want to deliver something that's more, the orchestra as a whole, from the perspective of the audience, perhaps, then maybe prioritize your room mics or your decatries. If you want something deliver something that can give you a bit more punch, or you can pan specifically in case you're delivering in some sort of surround format, then spot mics might work better. So think of where your recording will end up being delivered to.
Absolutely. Last question.
It's the last one from Douglas Carmichael. When setting the mastering compressor or limiter in my Roland Phantom 06 to guard against excessive peaks at the analog heat, should I use a short or long release time? And what ratio should I use to not overly degrade the output? 1.5 to 1 or 2.1 or 2 to 1?
Carl.
I wouldn't set any compression in an instrument. So compression is something you would do later on, further in the mix, and you'll do it later on in mastering. If you're compressing an instrument, maybe drums, if you're going into live situation, so you get your drums, with your background singers so they don't overwhelm them. But in a recording situation, I wouldn't use compression until towards the end of the mix.
And Mitchell Hill, you want to?
Yes, I think I agree with him 100%. To remember also what a compressor does and what a limiter does. A compressor is mainly used to adjust the average or RMS levels. So we'll say the general volume. And if you use it subtly or it's got a soft knee in it, you don't really hear it working that much. And it's good for, as if somebody had a magical hand, it was moving that level up and down. Limiters, on the other hand, are designed to react very quickly to peak levels. Those are ones that have a very fast rise time and a equally quick fall time. So you want a fast limiter to check for peaks that don't sneak through and blow up your 0 dB output. So it's all a matter of which mic works best. But as Carl said, you don't want to use either of them until the very end. If you had to use a compressor just to get the level, maybe while you're recording, but that limiter should only go on the back end.
And to keep Mickey coming back every Tuesday as much as we can, I'm going to give him the last word today.
Yeah, as Carl mentioned, I would definitely avoid compressing at the instrument. The instrument's not designed to be a processor like that. But I would not hesitate to do compression on the way into your recording chain, as long as you know the sound you're going for. Then that means you don't have that need to go back and undo that compression. If you're unsure, then don't do it. Don't do it while recording. Do it later during the mix. If in terms of your release time, if you want to get that fatter sound, you would want a quicker release so that essentially you're bringing down the transients closer to your tail, and you can use makeup gain to enlarge both of them and make your tail louder or thicker. And that would give you that fat sound, fat with a PH. In terms of ratio and threshold, use your ears for something that's very has a lot of very quick transients, and that's very peaky. I'd probably go 2 to 1 to 4 to 1, depending on the sound you're going for. And threshold, use your ears.
Use your ears. That's the last word we get, and it's a perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody. It's been great having you here. I love Audio Tuesdays. That takes care of the show for today. Thank you, all panelists. Thank you, all viewers, listeners, everybody involved in this. We're going to go ahead and roll the credits now, and we will see you back for another Audio Tuesday next Tuesday and other shows in between. Thanks for being here at Office Hours.
What was the transversal?
Oh, is the TT, the Telok traversal listed? I'm looking through and I don't see it. Lots of miles.
I claimed 170.
Well, as the Who said, I can hear for miles and miles and miles.
Yep,
62,093 miles. 62,093 miles.
Gentlemen, take care.
See you, Mitchell.
I would talk 500 miles. Ooh, listen to that. Wow.